Scientists and sea biologists say that the mass of squids on the planet exceeds the mass of all people. Keep this fact in your mind while you listen to the story of the Kraken. So no one knows exactly what this giant sea monster looks like. But according to the stories of old fishers and taverns, the records of travelers and legends, the Kraken looks like a giant squid. If so, it has the squid's anatomical properties and reproductive functions. And this is a big problem for us. A female squid can lay anywhere from 3 to 100,000 eggs. Even if most of them don't survive, it's still a lot. Many of these creatures live in the ocean's dark depths that people haven't yet fully explored, and it seems we'll know more about squids soon. The metabolism of these creatures is accelerating thanks to the increase in water temperature, and this causes population growth. Scientists call squids the weeds of the seas because of their rapid reproduction. They can potentially exceed the population of all fish and mammals. Perhaps there will be so many of them soon that they won't have enough food on the ocean floor. They will begin to migrate closer to the surface, small squid and monstrous giant ones. There may be a Kraken among them, or a few, or even tens, hundreds of thousands. And if this happens, humanity and all animals on Earth will face a huge problem. As the kings of nature, people can easily invent poison to destroy Krakens. But how to spread this poison? Giant squids, along with ordinary fish, dolphins, whales, seaweed, and phytoplankton, will suffer if it gets into the water. More than half of the world's oxygen is produced by the ocean. And if people spread this poison in the water, they'll risk disrupting the entire planet's ecosystem. The ocean will become lifeless. So, people have to forget about poisoning the water. For a while, we will be helpless against the squid apocalypse. Let's say a couple of billion squids rise to the surface. A couple million of them are Krakens. The first thing these monsters will want to do is get food. Lunch for them can be both shoals of fish and massive whales, and no one can stop them. Even if megalodons existed, they wouldn't be able to resist the giant tentacles and strong beaks of Krakens. The fish population in the ocean has declined. This means that people can't go fishing anymore. We can catch fish in lakes, rivers, and seas, but it's not enough. Seafood has become very expensive all over the world. A fish tank with goldfish is a luxury. Of course, humans learn to catch giant squids, which solves the problem of hunger in some areas. The profession of a squid catcher is becoming prestigious all over the world. This kind of fishing is dangerous and requires a lot of strength and courage. The second problem is sea travel. Every day, people transport millions of tons of cargo across the ocean. Huge businesses and economies of entire countries work thanks to such transportation. But now, Krakens swim close to the surface and make any voyage dangerous. One monster can quickly destroy a small ship. 10 or 20 Krakens are able to sink a giant cargo vessel. This leads to a reduction in logistics chains. Communication between continents is now maintained by air. The number of flights is increasing. Plane tickets are rising in price. Travel is becoming too expensive. This leads to a reduction in the number of tourists in some countries, which disrupts their economies. There are more Krakens and less food. Resting on a beach also becomes dangerous. Aggressive, hungry giant squids can come ashore to catch sunbathers. All shores are fenced. Swimming is forbidden. Of course, scientists invent some things to fight squids. Sound barriers, for example. Every ship is now equipped with a device that launches powerful ultrasonic waves into the water. They scare away all the fish and clear the way for boats. In the beginning, it helps, but then Krakens stop fearing it. Ultrasound only angers them. They pounce on ships and break sound barriers. Another thing that scares them away is sunlight. For millions of years, Krakens have been living on the dark ocean floor. Their eyes are used to the darkness, so they fear the bright light. During sunny weather, ships move freely. But as soon as the sun goes below the horizon or clouds obscure it, sea monsters come out of the ocean depths. It doesn't help much because it's impossible to sail across any ocean within a single sunny day. In addition, there is no guarantee that you won't get caught in a storm when the sun is hidden behind the clouds. That's why people invent powerful floodlights. They direct their beams at monsters' heads and drive them into the dark depths. Such projectors are expensive because they require a lot of energy. Only some ships can afford such a device. And while people seek more effective ways to fight Krakens, squids multiply, and this becomes the solution to the problem. The ocean is running out of fish. Food is not available on land. Like a snake devouring its tail, squids start fighting with one another. The water foams, and squids cling to each other with tentacles. Big krakens defeat smaller monsters. Their population is shrinking. A few giant squids the size of the Eiffel Tower survive after long battles. And when the fight is over, little squids come into play. Billions of cephalopods pounce on giant krakens. They are like flies clinging from all sides. Giant monsters can't fight them. Great, the problem with voyages is solved. Large ships can set sail, but it's still dangerous for people to swim in the sea since tiny monsters are still hungry. Logistics chains have been restored, but fish are still scarce in the ocean. Squids, like parasites, don't allow other creatures to dominate. And here, scientists come to help fish. Let's go back to our reality for a second. There's such a thing as a gene drive. It's a substance that changes the genetic code of living creatures. For example, scientists have implemented a gene drive in mosquitoes that cause malaria. Biologists changed the genome of these insects, so some female mosquitoes became infertile. Then these females spread the gene throughout the mosquito colony. As a result, more insects that couldn't conceive appeared. They continued to spread the gene, and this went on until the population reduced significantly. A gene drive is a low-cost way to get rid of invasive species of insects or rodents. Thus, scientists can control the population of entire species. But such actions can be dangerous. If some animal disappears, it can disrupt the whole ecosystem and lead to the disappearance of other animals. In the case of mosquitoes, nature didn't suffer much. So scientists use a gene drive against squid. But why couldn't they do it from the very beginning? Ordinary squids didn't pose a threat, and their average life expectancy is from 3 to 5 years. If scientists had launched a gene drive, then in 7 years all small squids would have disappeared. But it wouldn't have worked with krakens. According to myths and legends, one such monster can live for several hundred years. Now, when small squids have solved the problem with large ones, a gene drive comes into play. It takes several years to get rid of the squid. The ocean ecosystem begins to recover. People take fish and marine mammals from seas and rivers and transfer them to the ocean. The population of whales, sharks, octopuses, salmon, and hundreds of thousands of other species is growing. But then another threat awakens in the depths of the ocean. It turns out that when squids and krakens lived on the ocean floor, they didn't let even more terrible monsters move to the surface. Now that all arthropods have disappeared, new monsters are breaking free. First, marine earthquakes begin. But then, scientists discover that it's not the seabed shaking. Those are the backs of giant crabs. Hundreds of thousands of armored monsters with claws are rising to the surface. And this time, they can come ashore.
You're sitting at a coffee shop on Mars, keeping your head down, trying not to draw any attention to yourself. It's crowded, and many people are singing, dancing, and talking loudly about life on Mars. Your drink arrives, and you sip on it. So far, no one recognizes you. You're wearing a cloak with a large hoodie to cover your face and disguise yourself from everyone. Someone accidentally bumps into you and sees your face. The music stops, and now everyone is staring at you. You have nowhere to hide or run. You ignore the leering eyes and keep sipping on your beverage. An old bearded man sits in front of you, amazed to be in your presence.
"So, it's true. No one believed you'd make it," he says.
You don't reply and continue with your drink. Everyone else gathers around you. Another man speaks.
"Well, are you not going to tell us how you escaped from the clutches of the space Kraken?"
Everyone gasps in shock. No one has ever made it to tell the tale of the Kraken, except you. Your plan was to find your messenger to take you to a spaceship far away from this planet. But it's too late, now that everyone knows you're here. And the messenger fled, knowing all the attention was on you. You lay back your hoodie and explain what happened. 2 days ago. You're in your full gear, ready to make the voyage into deep space. You have a solo ship that's designed to maneuver through all the obstacles in space. You prepare the rest of the gear and fuel up. Everyone is watching you, knowing that you might not make it back. But the Kraken has been floating in space for too long, disrupting shipping containers bringing in goods. A small ship like yours can sneak past its acute sense of smell and vision. But larger ships will get destroyed. You made it your mission to find this Kraken and study it. If you learn its ways and patterns, you can figure out how to get rid of it. Everyone says their goodbyes, and you lift off. You know that it'll be a very long way to get there, possibly 3 days in the emptiness of space. You saw some quick footage of it, but no one knows exactly where it sleeps, or if it even does sleep. You put on some tunes and set your ship for cruise control. You make some notes and set the camera to document yourself while you prepare everything you need. You also have some cameras outside recording everything that moves, even thermal sensors to catch living creatures floating in space. After a few hours, you exit the safe quarters of Mars and enter into the hostile territory. There is no place to hide or anyone to help you. A few little ships like yours pass by now and then. They watch you going further to the Kraken. You notice many floating signs powered by machines warning you about the Kraken. The cameras start recording, and you begin your video journal, which is transmitting to your network at home. So far, nothing. It's quiet and dark. Hours pass, and you're just floating in the middle of nowhere. You almost feel like you want to turn around, but then you pick up something in the sensors. You see a large live object nearby. You turn off the lights and slow down your ship. You resume recording and start talking to yourself, explaining everything. The object is getting closer and closer. You move aside to avoid it and latch on to a floating rock, but you still don't see anything. Out of nowhere, you see some glowing jellyfish-like creatures flowing together in a cluster. On your thermal sensors, they appear to be large objects, but in fact, they are just little creatures. According to your studies, these creatures are some of the main foods for the Kraken, so they're probably running away from it. After a few minutes, the creatures float away, and you launch yourself out and turn the lights back on. A few more hours pass, and you still see no Kraken. Suddenly, a whoosh shakes your ship, and you're thrown slightly off course. You notice that a large object has spiked your thermal sensors and left. You keep going and check the playback settings to see if your cameras manage to catch something. You try to look carefully, but it seems like a gust of wind blew past you, which is weird because there is no wind in space. You check the thermal sensors and notice that a large object shaped like the Kraken has zipped past you. It's still around, and it has probably caught your scent. Your system's got some DNA particles and are studying them. After a while, they show that the Kraken's skin can change colors according to its surrounding. Its skin is thick and made up of some cosmic fluorescent material that is new to any creature you've ever come across. The system continues studying it. After a while, the Kraken goes off your radar and disappears. You circle back, trying to find it. People back on Mars can see the data and already have information about its size and skin quality. They even see some footage you've managed to catch. As you continue driving towards it, you open your floodlights, trying to see anything. Your cameras are still rolling. Suddenly, the Kraken changes skin color and appears right in front of you. Its large tentacles flash around, whipping nearby space debris. Its large eye that's as big as a bus looks right at you. It opens its mouth, and you see layers of sharp teeth circling like a grinder. It has a large beak that can break your ship easily. It starts flashing its colors rapidly as a way to warn you. It shoots out some liquid to move in a no-gravity space environment. It's moving towards you until it launches itself. Your ship has an auto force field for protection, but it can't sustain the powerful bite of the Kraken. After only a few seconds, the shield breaks, and your ship spirals down to another planet. You crash-landed in a swampy land. Your ship has survived, but it can't take off. The analysis of the Kraken is ready. It shows that it doesn't need oxygen to breathe, and its DNA is evolving. Now that it got a bite of your force field, it can adapt itself to create a bioforce field of a similar nature. But you crashed on a planet that is foreign to you. You put on your safety suit and observe the environment. The atmosphere is filled with nitrogen and sulfur. You get out and walk around. It has similar gravity to that of Earth. As you venture through the swamp, you start seeing little skin particles similar to those your ship has caught. The liquid below you is some foreign substance that seems to be deteriorating your suit, so you opt to hover. The trees are strange and seem to be living off the atmosphere, but there is no sign of life anywhere. Suddenly, you see a huge crater that leads to the center of the planet. You enter it and see some ships similar to yours. It seems that the Kraken knocked them off course, and they all crash-landed on this planet. Many of them seem to be intact, while others are completely obliterated. Your sensors pick up another reading. It senses another creature dwelling in the center. You try to get closer. You're doing your best to be as gentle as possible, but you feel the ground shaking below you. You duck down and try to avoid the rocks falling overhead. A large tentacle pops out of nowhere, and then another and another. It swings itself out and crawls in the open. According to your system's studies, this Kraken is 10 times larger and even looks different. It doesn't spot you, but it can sense that you're around. It starts thrashing the planet, trying to find you. It knocks your ship. You try to find a way to start it, but it's missing a piece. You find another abandoned ship and take out the part that you need and put it on your ship. Your suit has an auto repair function that allows you to fix your ship without the tools. After a few minutes, it's ready for takeoff. You power up your ship, even though it's damaged, and lift off. You manage to sneak past the Kraken. Everyone at the coffee shop is silent. Many don't believe your stories. They had stopped receiving live transmissions before you were knocked off by the space Kraken. Out of nowhere, an alarm rings and warns that the Kraken has arrived. Everyone rushes off in a panic. You hear a voice in your head. It's a bunch of gibberish, but you start getting visions of the Kraken talking to you. It knows you're here, and it's coming for you. The first thing you feel is some heaviness around your body, as if you're sleeping under a soft but weighted blanket. It feels nice, and you're too lazy to do anything. Fortunately, you gather enough strength to move the blanket. You open your eyes, and it's weird. You're surrounded by some blue glow. You want to rub your eyes and discover that you have tentacles instead of hands. How about skipping the part where you're terrified and can't believe you've turned into the Kraken? After a couple of days of existential horror, panic, and total madness, you finally calm down. Now, let's figure out what it's like to be the most terrifying ocean monster. So, that heavy blanket is water pressure. It's colossal at the depth where you're hiding. Few living beings can withstand it. Take a passenger car down there, and it will burst apart under the heavy weight of the water. But you're the Kraken. You're more powerful than any car. Your body doesn't collapse in such conditions. Your thick elastic skin can withstand any pressure, and strong muscles allow you to move freely here. And here's the thing with the blue glow. You're so deep down that sunlight almost doesn't penetrate here. It's hard to tell where's up and down because of the water pressure. But fortunately, you have huge eyes that, like the lenses of a telescope, catch the light coming from the surface. An ordinary person can't see anything except darkness at this depth. But you have something like a night vision device built into your eyes, so you see this blue glow. There's almost nothing at this depth. It's only endless, heavy emptiness. You can see a few fish and several wrecks of sunken ships. The sea creatures you meet here are pretty unusual. These are anglers and all sorts of transparent squid. Come to think of it, giant squid are your only friends here, and you're like a king to them. In general, hanging out close to the ocean floor is pretty boring. You sleep and eat, that's all. It would be best if you swam higher to get more snacks. You rise, and the water around you becomes brighter. More and more sunlight reaches this place, and you finally meet other inhabitants of the ocean. Turtles, sharks, jellyfish, octopuses, and stingrays dart away as soon as they notice you. All of them except jellyfish. They don't care. You look for a place to eat and notice a shoal of fish. Great, here's lunch. After you've eaten, you stay there, scaring fish and dolphins just for fun. You like the way you can control your tentacles. You have 10 of them. It's impossible to put into words what you feel, but imagine that the fingers on your hands have become huge, like pool cues. And it's incredible. You can extend your tentacles to be as long as a passenger Boeing. Also, you have suction cups on them. You can grab anything so tightly that no creature will slip away from you. Thanks to the tentacles, you swim fast. First, you move them in different directions, then press them together, propelling yourself forward. Strong streams of water that you create push all the fish aside. You notice a blue whale. It's the largest mammal in the world, but next to you, it looks like a puppy. So, you swim, eat, scare fish and other marine creatures, and that's it. Your life is kind of boring. And how long will it last? 100 years? 1,000? You want to have some fun. So you swim up to the surface and get almost blinded by bright sunlight. You try to get used to it. The water is quiet. There's no wind. You look around and notice a tiny dot ahead. Wow, it's a large wooden fishing ship with sails. Finally, you'll have some fun. You can't wait to see people and tell them about yourself. So you're happily swimming toward it. But if someone was watching you, you'd probably look pretty scary. You get stuck in a fishing net. It's thin, so you easily tear it apart and rise to the surface. The people on the deck are terrified. They scream and run in different directions. Hey guys, where are you going? I just want to hang out with you. They seem so small. Fishers throw harpoons and axes at you, but you don't feel any pain. You put one tentacle on the wooden deck and accidentally break it. The whole ship is fragile, like a matchbox. Okay, it's better not to touch it. You turn around and accidentally flip the ship over. All the people that were on board are now in the water. Fortunately, you have enough tentacles to save them all. You catch every fisher and see the horror in their eyes. Someone even faints. You put the ship back on the water and help the people return to the deck. Then you push the boat away and swim toward land. But you decide not to show yourself to people on the shore. Those sailors you saved will tell everyone how they survived meeting a giant monster. Everyone will talk about how terrible you are, but no one will mention that you also saved them. How unfair. You return to the ocean depths and fall asleep. Some strange sounds wake you up. It's like water dripping from a tap into a sink. You open your eyes and see faint flashes around. Oh, well, that's interesting. You swim up and realize that a thunderstorm has woken you up. It seems rather severe. The sky is black and the waves are huge. You notice a big vessel sailing amongst this chaos. This ship is different from the one you've seen before. It's made of iron and it has no sails because it's a modern cargo ship. It seems that you've been asleep for a couple of 100 years. The people on board notice you and fire a signal flare. A bright red light blinds you. You spread your tentacles and accidentally push the ship. It's heavy and doesn't flip over. It seems that technology was developing while you were sleeping. The storm is getting stronger. The ship is rolling from side to side. You try to hold it with your tentacles, but it scares the people on board. They scream, and you understand their reaction. A colossal monster has come out of the black depths and grabbed their ship. It's unpleasant to see that they're afraid of you, so you decide to swim away. Offended, you're hiding close to the ocean floor. It turns out it's not much fun being the Kraken. You can only hang out with fish, but they can't talk. People are afraid of you, and you don't want to make them uncomfortable. You feel so alone in this world. You eat your lunch and go back to sleep.
Hey, Mr. Kraken, can you hear me?
A voice says. You wake up and shudder, terrified. Who said that? Were all the stories about the Flying Dutchman true? Have you just heard some phantom speaking to you?
I understand you're confused, Mr. Kraken, so swim up to the surface and you'll find out everything.
A few minutes later, you come out of the water and see a huge flying ship. It's floating right above the water. But the most fantastic thing is that people on the deck are not afraid of you. They look at you with interest, and even with some sympathy. You notice a man in a strange helmet among them.
Hi, it's me talking to you, thanks to this telepathy device. You can think about anything too, and I'll hear you.
It's the 24th century. People have invented technologies for communicating with animals and fish. They found out that almost all creatures have no thoughts and live following their instincts.
But then, people detected some brain activity coming from the ocean depths. They discovered you. You seem to be one of the most intelligent beings on the planet, and people are very interested in communicating with you. Finally, the centuries of your loneliness are over.
The Kraken is a colossal squid, a legendary sea monster, the biggest hunk of calamari you ever saw. And if this monster had existed, the world would have changed beyond recognition. The Kraken has powerful tentacles, solid muscles with suckers at the end. They're just impossible to escape. The Kraken can break a ship in half or just pull it down into the depths. But the worst thing about the Kraken is its size. According to old sailor stories, the Kraken reached 5,000 feet in length. That's almost 10 soccer fields. Hey, maybe the Kraken could play soccer. The Kraken legend said the monster was so giant that sailors mistook it for a small island. In past centuries, it would have been impossible to defeat such a beast. If the Kraken existed in reality, it might have had offspring. Yeah, in all the world's oceans, there would be giant monsters that could sink any ship. It's unlikely that the Kraken would have competitors in its habitat, so its population would grow strongly. Since the Kraken is enormous, it would need lots of food, so the population of other large sea animals would fall significantly. Blue whales, great white sharks, other giant squids, all the big sea creatures would be endangered. Many people are starving because of the reduction of large fish in the ocean. Urban economies that rely on fishing will be in decline. Prices for small fish around the world are getting more expensive because it's unsafe to fish. To defeat the Kraken, you need powerful weapons, but the monster is tough to catch. The Kraken belongs to the cephalopod genus. This species includes squid and octopus, some of the most intelligent creatures on the planet. The Kraken is a skilled hunter and will never fight in the open. So, what can you do? You can't track the Kraken because it approaches from the depths, not the surface. Though you may be able to tell that the monster is somewhere nearby if a lot of fish surface. When the Kraken swims, it scares all the fish in the vicinity. But it might already be too late. A huge tentacle emerges from the water, resembling a high tower. This tower falls on the deck of the ship, shattering it. The sailors scream and run. The Kraken lands a second blow, and the vessel is almost capsized. Next, the Kraken wraps its giant tentacles around the ship and pulls it to the bottom. Oh boy! What if the sailors managed to detach the ship from the tentacles of this monster? With the help of powerful weapons, the ship's crew strikes back. The Kraken retreats under the water. It's hurt, angry. It seems the battle is over, but here comes the worst. A whirlpool forms beside the ship. Thanks to its considerable weight, when the Kraken dives, it creates a whirlpool behind it. Like a drain in a giant bathtub, this whirlpool sucks the ship down. The battle with the Kraken is lost. Well, that was unfortunate. You might be able to defeat the monster if you can anticipate its attack in advance. But the Kraken can see you and your ship before you can see it. Colossal squids live in deep waters, and they have the largest eyes among all animals. The squid's eye is the size of a dinner plate. Thanks to this, they can see their prey from far away. Similarly, a Kraken would spot the ship much sooner than sonar could pick up the Kraken. It would always have the drop on you. Well, that's not good. Around the world, cargo transportation by ship is declining. Airlines provide the only safe connection between the continents. This will increase air pollution. The most successful enemy of the Kraken is submarines. They travel at great depths and are equipped with powerful echolocators to help detect the Kraken in advance. Subs are well armed too, and the round metal body is not so easy to destroy. A single Kraken may be defeated by a submarine, but what if there are several sea monsters? 3 Kraken can wrap their tentacles around the submarine and drag it deeper into the water where the pressure will destroy their enemy. In other words, they'll have a crush on you. The existence of the Kraken will have dramatically changed the development of many countries. What if Christopher Columbus, on his famous journey, noticed an island that he thought was the New World? He approaches it, but tentacles emerge from the island and sink Columbus's ship. The colonization of North America is delayed, maybe until airplanes are invented, and the first crewed flight wasn't until the 20th century. There would be no Hollywood, there would be no hamburgers, no famous American music playing. There wouldn't be YouTube, which means you wouldn't be watching this video right now. Worst of all, the internet wouldn't exist either. And all this because of one stupid monster squid. The Vikings wouldn't sail on their long ships to raid and settle foreign territories. The history of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and other Nordic countries would have changed drastically. Hey, maybe the Titanic wouldn't have hit an iceberg, but a giant sea monster instead. Though it's unlikely that people would take trips on huge ocean liners in a world where the Kraken exists. Maybe though, the Kraken isn't all that aggressive. Still, they need a lot of food, and because of the growing population of these monsters, there will be much less food in the ocean. Therefore, the Kraken will increasingly come to the surface for hunting. In the future, the Kraken will migrate closer to the shore. In many countries, people then are not allowed to swim in the ocean. Imagine floating on the waves and a monster the size of a skyscraper is swimming right below you. Relaxing at sea and on the beach will no longer be popular. Many countries that live off tourism become impoverished. When the Krakens grow hungrier, they try to capture prey from land. A huge squid could attack small port cities. Houses, docks, streets, everything can be crushed. A tremendous amount of plastic is thrown into the ocean near the coasts of large countries. Billions of tons of plastic will bother the Kraken. An angry, hungry monster can attack bridges like the Golden Gate Bridge. Imagine that a huge squid surrounds the bridge and blocks all traffic. Some of these squids could break the strong cables with their power, and the entire structure would collapse into the water. Ooh! It's good that the Kraken doesn't really exist to swim in our seas and oceans, at least as far as we know. But could the monster have actually existed? Legends stretch back years, but scientific evidence appeared in the middle of the 19th century. In 1857, a 3-inch diameter squid beak was discovered on the coast of Denmark. Other huge squid remains were found in the Bahamas, and then scientists were convinced that gigantic squids existed. While colossal squid has been officially discovered since then, it's been more than 100 years, and we still don't know what max size they can grow to. The fact is, colossal squids are one of the most elusive creatures on Earth. They live in the depths of the ocean where it's challenging for scientists to reach. Any dive to a greater depth requires powerful, bulky equipment. Underwater bath escapes and cameras make a lot of noise and light, which squids notice from afar. They flee before we can see them. The legend of the Kraken probably appeared because of a real colossal squid. People in the past didn't know about these creatures' existence, so when they saw one for the first time, they described it as a massive, terrible monster. It's difficult to say if these huge squids were the size of a small island, because the truth is, we've only studied about 5% of the ocean. It may be that in its depths, monsters much more terrible than the Kraken swim. Like my nephew, Peter.
It's dark, and you can't see anything. There's slime all over. The ground is soft and moving. You try to find your way around by feeling the moving walls around you. After a while, you hear some painful screams in the distance. You call out for help, but no one responds. You're a captain of a ship, and you are just consumed by the mighty Kraken. You keep tumbling over, not knowing if you're even going in the right direction. The screams get louder and louder. It's only a matter of time before you see someone. As you make your next step, a large piece of wood swooshes past you, almost knocking you down. That piece of wood was from the ship that the Kraken had swallowed. It had also swallowed the entire crew alive, so they must be somewhere inside the beast's belly. You keep following the screams. They lead you down another path that looks like an esophagus. You grab a piece of wood and slide down the slimy insides. It's dark, so you rip out a piece of cloth from your shirt and wrap it around a large plank, setting it on fire. This makeshift torch allows you to see where you're going in proper detail. You can see the large veins pumping inside. Each vein can fit more than 3 people through it. After a while, you start seeing more debris from your ship. including the treasures you had discovered and kept in the bottom. But now, those huge piles of gold are worthless since you're out looking for your crewmates in this dark, smelly interior. You reach a point where there seems to be multiple tunnels around, each leading to a different point. You know it's impossible to climb back out from the mouth, so going deeper is the only solution. You decide to go with your gut and slide down the smallest tunnel, which is covered in slime and other liquids. You snuff out your torch and tuck it away to use it again later. You slip through and get stuck for a while. The Kraken is still swimming, but seems to be taking a break and stops. The giant veins and blood vessels slow down, and the flesh tunnel that you're crawling through becomes wider. Before you know it, you are plummeting down the large shaft until you reach a liquid pool. The second you splash in it, you start to feel the acid burning through your clothes. You're in one of the Kraken's stomachs. You take off your shirt and paddle on a plank, rowing yourself across the acidic lake. You can see more broken pieces of your ship scattered around. Out of nowhere, the Kraken springs into action and starts swimming rapidly. You don't have a choice but to hold on to the plank and keep yourself afloat without any acid going into your eyes. You shut them. Now, you're tossed further down the stomach where the digestion is happening. Over here, the acid is even stronger and melts anything that's in it. The smell is atrocious, and you can't find your way to leave. But in the distance, you see some of your crew members stranded in the middle of a small stomach island. You see some sharks still swimming around that haven't been digested yet. There's nothing you can do at the moment but try to get through and make it to your crew members. You get on another piece of wood and row yourself toward them. This time, the stomach acid is melting the wood away. Luckily, someone from your crew tosses you another plank, so you hop onto it and row your way to them. You climb ashore. Everyone is happy to see you. You try to figure out a way out, but the exits are covered in acid. More water seeps in along with plenty of marine animals. The acid levels are rising, and everyone huddles together. After a while, the Kraken swallows a large humpback whale that's thrashing around the acidic water. It's making the Kraken upset, so it starts moving, tossing everyone around. You, along with many others, land on the whale and hold onto it tight. It seems like the Kraken wants to expunge the whale out somehow. The inner walls of the stomach contract until it shrinks enough to let the whale out. You and your crew members are still holding onto the whale, but it's not easy. Finally, the Kraken spits out the whale and swims off to the bottom of the ocean. The new challenge is to swim to the surface to breathe. The whale pushes you and everyone else up. Without it, no one would have made it to the surface to catch some oxygen. You don't know where you are. Some of your crewmates grab onto some loose pieces of your ship to stay afloat. You swim to one and climb aboard. The sun is starting to set. There's nothing in sight. The crew is feeling cold and hungry. Worst of all, it's feeding time for the sharks. Everyone climbs up on their planks to stay out of the water. Before you know it, shark fins start to pop up from every corner. There's nothing to do except survive the night. The next day arrives. No one has managed to get any sleep. Everyone decides to fix all the planks together and row towards the sun. While other people debate another direction, the whole crew listens to your final word. The sun is scorching and everyone's energy is low. There's no fresh water to drink. No one can catch fish for eating. There's still the ever-looming threat of sharks and the Kraken. One of your crew members spots something in the distance, which appears to be an island. Everyone cheers and hugs each other and paddles their way there. After a few hours, you reach the island and stuff your hands in the sand. Someone is running around, while others embrace the sand and palm trees. But for some reason, something seems off. Some birds are flying around. They aren't scared of you. Everyone moves to the center of the island to discover if anyone has been here before. A small campfire sits in the middle of the island, but there are no signs of people anywhere. This island's too small to have any residents. There seems to be no sign of anyone who has ever visited it, besides the campfire. After a while, the island starts moving. Everyone climbs a tree and water covers the island. In the distance, you see a large figure emerge from the water and turn towards you.
It's a giant sea turtle. You were on the back of a giant sea turtle this whole time. It moves gracefully across the water and stops after a couple of hours. The crew members build some huts and start a fire to cook some food and sleep comfortably. You look out in the distance and at the night sky with the stars populating the horizon. You climb the highest tree to get some rest and peace. Far away, you see the Kraken swimming around and getting closer to the turtle. But compared to it, the Kraken is only the size of a shoe compared to a person. The next day, you tread around and discover the rest of the Turtleback Island. Some unique animals you've never seen before are living here. Some of the most exotic birds are flying around, and the animals don't seem to take you as a threat. You reach the top of the mountain covered with trees and vines to get a good look at the island. You have a panoramic view of everything and discover that there's a huge hole in the ground right below you. And you see what appears to be digging tools left by other explorers. You gather your crew and rush to the hole. You have to make your way through vines and climb over some challenging terrain to reach there. The main question is, where does this hole go if the bottom of this island is a giant turtle shell? You step on the site and see many abandoned tools and plans. You pick up a map and see that there is an X marking for treasures beyond anyone's imagination. You gather your crew. Everyone picks up some of the equipment. Another scary question is, why did they abandon this equipment? You study the plans. They state all the steps except the final one, which no one seems to have figured out. After a while, you descend the hole and make your way towards the bottom. But what you discover is even more shocking than what you expected. And you'll have to find out what it is next time.
It was just a couple of hours before midnight. Some of the 2,200 passengers of a large, luxurious ocean liner were still partying in the beautiful first-class lounges. The rest were asleep in their beds, some of them in spacious cabins filled with paintings and decorated with ornate carvings, others in tiny rooms below sea level. All of these people had only one thing in common. On that chilly April night, all of them were heading from Southampton in England to New York City. The ship was called the Titanic, and at that time, it was considered unsinkable. At the very beginning of the journey, the liner nearly collided with the steamship New York. Luckily, the Titanic managed to pass by the other vessel with several feet to spare. A common sigh of relief escaped the passengers crowding the liner's decks. Little did they know what was awaiting them in the near future. Several days later, when the ship was already in the North Atlantic Ocean, 370 miles away from Newfoundland, the unthinkable happened. At about 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, those who were still awake were knocked over by some mysterious and powerful force. Passengers who were already in their beds got catapulted to the floor. Screams and total confusion. Months before the disaster struck, a ginormous chunk of ice had broken away from a glacier in southwest Greenland. It was made of the snow that had fallen about 100,000 years ago, when mammoths were still roaming the planet. When the iceberg just started its journey, it was a huge thing, almost 1,700 feet long. It also weighed 75 million tons. But then it floated much further to the south than normal, right into the area the Titanic had to cross on its way to North America. Even after melting into the water for months, the iceberg still weighed an impressive 1.5 million tons. Its top part was towering over the water for almost 100 feet. Even so, it looked harmless next to the massive ocean liner, but only at first glance. What people saw was just a tiny part of a jumbo piece of ice. The largest part of any iceberg is hidden under the surface, with a mere 1/10 visible above the water. The Titanic iceberg wasn't an exception. The moment the ship collided with it, the vessel was doomed. Unable to divert its course, it crashed into the ice, rupturing at least 5 of its hull compartments. They immediately started to fill with water, which then flooded each succeeding compartment. The front of the ship started to sink. This raised the back part almost vertically into the air, and then, with a deafening roar, the liner broke in half. The rest is history. But what if what we know about the disaster is not true? What if the ship hadn't been wrecked by an iceberg? What if it had been something more treacherous and way more alive that sank the Titanic? Far, far beneath the surface, in the ocean's dim, dark depths, a shadow lurks. Imagine an enormous creature, round, flat, and full of arms, or rather, powerful tentacles. It resembles a giant squid or octopus, but much, much bigger. Its descriptions go from as long as 10 ships to 1.5 miles long. Rumor has it unlucky sailors sometimes mistake the sea monster for an island, but instead of stepping on dry land, they're dragged down into the ocean. These people meet the Kraken, a legendary creature feared by everyone who sets off on a sea voyage. Usually, the Kraken haunts the seas off the coast of Norway through Iceland and all the way to Greenland. Who knows what has brought the beast further away from home? The waters of the North Atlantic are just as chilly, and the creature feels good and curious. Once it notices the Titanic, the ship has no chances to escape its attention. It's dark. That's why those on the ocean liner don't notice the first alarm bells. The water around the ship starts to bubble. If you strain your ears, you can hear bizarre gurgling sounds. If you strain your eyes, you can see thousands of fish and jellyfish rising to the surface. They feel something's up down below. But even if someone on the Titanic noticed this hectic activity, they wouldn't have time to get out of the way of the horrifying beast. Its enormous size and super long and strong tentacles turn it into a predator you can't escape. A 9-year-old boy standing on the deck knows nothing about the sea monster. He's just watching countless small islands rising out of the sea, very, very slowly. The kid doesn't understand why, but all the blood in his body suddenly runs cold. Hundreds of tiny fish are leaping about in the pools between these sandbanks. But soon, they roll off into the water over the sides of the ginormous something. Several sharp points appear above the surface. The intrigued boy thinks they look like horns. They keep growing, thicker and thicker, the higher they rise. Soon, they're towering over the massive Titanic, dwarfing the ship. These horns are the Kraken's dreaded arms. The boy is paralyzed by fear, but then he spots the monster's eye. It's as big as an elephant. It makes the kid come to his senses and dash away, screaming like there's no tomorrow. The boy's shouting attracts people. They gather along the ship's side, trying to spot what scared the child so much. And then they see. First one, then more and more passengers and crew members lean over the railing to get a better look. They aren't being careless, they're just in shock. Indeed, it's hard to believe your eyes when they tell you a dreaded beast is about to attack the ship you're on. Plus, it's dark, and no one can see clearly what that huge shadow is. But the next several minutes prove it's not a mirage. All of a sudden, the creature rises one of its monstrous arms and stretches it toward the vessel. It might very well be longer than the liner's entire hull. Women start screaming and fainting. Men seem to be just as terrified. Those who have managed to keep their heads clear sweep up kids and run for shelter. That's when the first powerful hit shakes the vessel. The Kraken's had enough waiting. It's ready for action. Panic engulfs people on board the Titanic. Running around aimlessly and screaming, they create chaos that makes the beast even more interested. Normally, the monster just wants to be left alone. It rests deep down on the ocean floor, using its long tentacles to tether itself to the bottom and lazily hunt for food. It only rises to the surface when the weather's unusually warm, or when it gets disturbed. The Titanic is probably too massive and loud. It draws the creature out of its slumber. When the beast gets to the surface and sees a large, glistening boat, wow, the thing mesmerizes the creature. It holds out one of its tentacles to touch the unusual construction. The material is hard, and the beast wonders if the thing will break when squeezed. Without wasting much time, it wraps several arms around the ship and tries to squish it. Tiny creatures fussing around, falling overboard, and making annoying high-pitched noises start to irritate the Kraken. It's getting angry. Easing its grip, the monster circles the Titanic several times, getting ready for the next attack. This time, the strike is much stronger. It bends the metal and makes it brittle. One more movement of a deft tentacle, and the ship starts to fill with water. The Kraken retreats, as if to enjoy the results of its efforts. But then, it notices the ship trying to speed up in futile attempts to put some distance between itself and the monster. People on board the Titanic heave a sigh of relief. The beast is nowhere in sight. Little do they know that the Kraken never lets its toys get away. The ship is beginning to slow down. Its rear part is slowly lifting up, and the front is going down underwater. Passengers and crew members are falling over onto the decks. Most of them are too scared to make a sound. That's why everything's happening in almost complete eerie silence. Until the ship breaks into two parts under its own weight. The crash is so powerful that it scares away even the Kraken. Spooked, the beast dives back into the ocean, which creates a massive boiling whirlpool in that spot. The suction is dragging what's left of the Titanic to the depths of the ocean. The most tragic thing here, though, the Kraken isn't even interested in people on board the ship. This creature is content to munch on fish. It doesn't need bigger prey. It's the animal's curiosity that's now pulling the huge ship down to the bottom. Does the majestic liner have any hope? I think you know the answer.
The sky is burning. The world's oceans are foaming. Thunder and lightning are shaking the air. Two of the most terrible and powerful monsters collide in a duel. A harbinger of the end of the world. Just the sight of this monster can drive anyone mad. Great and atrocious Cthulhu. And the biggest squid on the planet is fighting against it. A beast that knows no fear because it's fear itself. The cause of 1,000 shipwrecks. The mighty and hideous Kraken. Let the most epic fight in the history of the universe begin. You're on a fishing boat, sailing in a calm ocean. The water is crystal clear, and there's no wind. The sea merges with the horizon. The land isn't visible, and you feel free. You look over the side of the boat and notice something strange in the water. You're floating in the center of a huge black spot, surrounded by a wide field of green. What's that? Oil spilled into the water that took on such a strange hue? Then why is it so perfectly round? Suddenly, you realize what it is, and the blood freezes in your veins. The black circle is the pupil in the center of a huge green eye. The thing that's looking right at you from the water right now is so big that your ship looks like a speck next to it. It's the Kraken. But don't worry, the monster isn't interested in a small prey like you. The Kraken has been sinking ships for centuries and never met any decent resistance. There are thousands of boats lying on the sea floor, but what's the point? The Kraken longs for a real challenge, but can't find it. The largest mammal on Earth is the blue whale, which is no more than a pet goldfish for the Kraken. Even a megalodon could easily lose to the tentacled beast in battle. Maybe look for some great monster on the bottom of the Mariana Trench? No, the pressure is too high, and there's almost nothing living there. But then, the Kraken has an idea. It goes to the most remote place on Earth, a place rarely visited and poorly explored. This place is called Point Nemo. Here, deep below the ocean surface, lies the ancient city of Relaya, built long before the appearance of humans, and amidst the slumbering ruins, the huge and powerful Cthulhu is dreaming. This ancient demigod has been resting here for hundreds of millennia. All this time, Cthulhu has been waiting for its hour to wreak havoc on Earth. It's sleeping, but even in its dreams, Cthulhu communicates with members of its very own cult following. It uses telepathy to get into their minds and make them do atrocious things. But all of a sudden, Cthulhu's slumber is interrupted. Who dares wake it so rudely? Cthulhu opens its angry red eyes, overgrown with seaweed, and sees a huge squid in front of it.
The Kraken has finally found a worthy opponent. Immediately, it pounces on Cthulhu and wraps its tentacles around the monster's head. The fight begins. Cthulhu heavily pushes off from the sea floor and rushes to the surface, dragging the Kraken with it. Two giant monsters, larger than the tallest skyscrapers, emerge from the water. The sea is raging, and clouds are gathering over the battlefield. Enraged, Cthulhu strikes at the Kraken, but it doesn't seem to feel anything. Lightning flashes in the black and churning clouds. Cthulhu tries to tear the Kraken off itself, but the squid's tentacles firmly grasp the green monster. Meanwhile, you're on your way to Point Nemo to watch the battle unfold. You need to sail from the coast of Chile, and strange things are happening there right now. Hundreds of sailors are climbing on board dozens of ships. There are ordinary fishing vessels, as well as heavily armed and loaded Navy ships. And when you ask anyone where all these people are going, they all give you a dark look and answer, into eternity. The Kraken is taking the upper hand, and Cthulhu calls its followers to help. It hopes the ships will be able to help defeat the enemy, but it'll be 2 days before the first of them arrive from land. Cthulhu finally tears off the Kraken and throws it into the water. The squid attacks again, but Cthulhu grabs it by the tentacles and lifts it above its head. Lightning strikes the Kraken, but it's no more than a spark to the giant monster. At the same time, the entranced sailors stand on decks and look in the direction of the battlefield. At night, they fall asleep and see the same dream about the ancient city of Relia. In the center of it, there's a twisted chapel, and inside, Cthulhu sits on its throne, calling its followers. Day and night and day, the monsters have been fighting each other with their last strength. And at last, tiny dots gather around them. The ships have arrived. They're ready to attack the Kraken, and Cthulhu gives them a mental order. But the Kraken has its own ace up its sleeve. It hadn't been sinking ships just for fun. Very often, it saved thousands of marine creatures caught in fishing nets. And now, they and their offspring from all over the ocean come to help the Kraken. Huge octopuses, blue whales, great white sharks, electric eels. They're all attacking enemy ships. Whales are ramming the submarines, and eels are turning vehicle engines off with their electric discharges. Suddenly, the Kraken dives under the water. Did it give up? Got scared? Not likely. Cthulhu looks out into the ocean and waits for the squid to attack. The Kraken swims beneath the fighting people and fish. It starts twisting its tentacles, creating a huge whirlpool. The ships are doomed now, and Cthulhu can only rely on itself. The Kraken is a powerful creature, but it's an animal after all, while Cthulhu is incredibly intelligent, albeit malevolent. It understands that the Kraken is a sea monster and can be defeated once on land. Cthulhu's roar shakes the skies. Lightning bolts strike the ocean. The water is boiling. The ancient city of Relia is rising from the bottom of the sea. The Kraken can't escape here. It needs water. The squid fights Cthulhu with the last of its strength, but without its element, it quickly loses. Cthulhu is victorious. Now, being woken, it's going to destroy the rest of the world, as was foretold. But the fight couldn't have gone unnoticed. Thanks to satellite data, the world already knows what's happened, and a plan has been devised to put down the ancient monster in case it wins. Fighter jets enter the scene and attack Cthulhu. The monster raises its arms to the sky. Clouds are gathering around it. An electric discharge sparkles in the clouds, and electricity disappears within a few hundred miles, including the electronics on board the jets. They're falling down into the water. There's no way to defeat the mythic beast. But what is it? Satellites are suddenly falling from the sky in dozens. Cthulhu didn't know that Point Nemo is the dumping ground for space debris. Since this is the farthest point from Earth, it's safe to drop idle satellites here. Right now,
Hundreds of them are falling on the ancient city and bombarding the monster. Disoriented by the sudden assault, Cthulhu retreats back underwater along with its city. Then and there, it decides to go back to sleep for another 1,000 years and wait for a perfect moment to ruin the world. Cthulhu's mind-controlling ability made all the witnesses of the battle forget what they saw. Humanity is again unaware of the dangers from the depths. Cthulhu doesn't want people to be ready for its awakening. If you enter these coordinates in the GPS, you'll see where Point Nemo is. In 1997, oceanographers recorded a mysterious sound from the depths of the sea. It was called the bloop and can be easily found on the internet. This event led many people to believe in the existence of Cthulhu. But the panic didn't last long. It turned out that the bloop was the sound of a glacier splitting. Or maybe it's Cthulhu that made people think that way. Who knows? The deeper you go, the creepier they get. You're about to travel to the darkest ocean depths and check whether this claim is true. Are the creatures living there as scary as people think? You go 120 feet down underwater. Pay close attention to the bottom under your flippers. Oh my, what's that terrifying face half hidden in the sand? That's the northern stargazer. You can meet this fish in the eastern United States. It buries itself in the sand until unsuspecting prey gets near. Then, the nightmarish creature electrically shocks the poor animal and dines on it. You are moving deeper to 240 feet under the surface. That's where you spot a colorful, puffy creature, no more than 1 foot long. It's the sarcastic fringehead. At first, the fish seems to be harmless. Only unless it's provoked. When this animal is agitated, it opens its huge mouth to fend off predators. This defense tactic is a sight to behold, both surprising and frightening. Luckily, the fish is no threat to people whatsoever. The creature you see next can comfortably live in shallow waters, but you meet it at a depth of 900 feet. You don't even need to wonder why the animal's called the Game of Thrones brittle star. Unlike starfish that slowly crawl across the seabed, this creature moves fast. It wriggles its long, flexible arms to get from point A to point B. Its body is protected by a hard calcium carbonate shell. Also called snake stars, these creatures are tiny and easily fit in nooks, cracks, and small crevices in rocks. At a much greater depth of 2,000 feet, you come across the giant squid. For a long time, it was thought to be a creature from legends rather than a real animal. The giant squid was first caught on camera in 2001, and it's exactly as big as its name implies. The creature's eyeballs are the size of soccer balls, and the squid itself can weigh up to 600 pounds. Almost 3,000 feet below the surface, you get spooked by another creepy-looking animal. It's somewhat red and rather small, no longer than 1 foot long. As you approach the creature, it looks rather docile, or maybe just indifferent. The vampire squid, that's the animal's name, looks like an umbrella with tentacles. It doesn't even produce ink, so you leave it alone. Soon after that, at a depth of 3,200 feet, you meet the cookie cutter shark. This creature is a parasite. It attaches itself to big fishes, dolphins, whales, and sometimes even people. Then, using its neatly arranged serrated teeth, it gouges out cookie-sized pieces of meat. This nasty glowing animal doesn't grow larger than 20 inches and lives in the ocean twilight zone. At a depth of 3,300 feet, the light becomes a rare and valuable thing. The animals living that far away from the surface have to evolve unusual features to survive. That's how the barrel-eye fish ended up with a transparent head and 2 super-sensitive barrel-shaped eyes. Right now, pretty much like always, they're pointed upward, allowing the fish to see potential prey and you. Almost 4,000 feet below the surface, you see something droopy and saggy. The blobfish doesn't have a skeleton or any muscle. Its jelly-like flesh lets the creature survive incredible water pressure. Despite its appearance, the blobfish is an ambush predator. It usually lies very still on the bottom, waiting for unsuspecting prey to swim by. You go a bit deeper and spot a creature that looks particularly ghastly. The goblin shark senses prey with its snout. The creature's terrifying jaws are attached to elastic ligaments. When some animal comes too close, the shark catapults its mouth forward to catch it. If your mouth could do the same, you would be able to eat things dangling 7 inches away from your face. Even deeper than that, at 5,000 feet, you notice another member of the shark family. The frilled shark looks like an overgrown eel, but its gills are lined with red fringe at the edges, hence the name. The creature's horrifying mouth has 25 rows of razor-sharp backward-facing teeth, 300 in total. The shark prefers to hover in the water, waiting for its prey to come closer. Then, it charges at it like a snake. Suddenly, you see something glow brightly like an electric bulb. But after coming closer, you recoil in horror. The creature looks like an upgraded eel equipped with oversized teeth. That's the deep-sea dragonfish that can live at a depth of 6,000 feet. Chemical processes going on inside the fish's body produce an eerie red glow. This glow is used to communicate with other fish. At the same depth, you meet another deep-sea inhabitant. Its most prominent feature is its huge mouth. Thanks to it, the gulper eel can swallow its prey whole. Its stomach can expand to a terrifying size when it needs to fit something large. At a depth of 6,600 feet, you come across an angry-looking creature with a fishing rod over its head. It's the deep-sea anglerfish. The animal has an unusual dorsal spine, even though it's worn only by females. It protrudes above their mouth and has a lure on its tip, some luminous flesh that baits prey. The anglerfish has such a big mouth and its body is so pliable that it can swallow animals twice its own size. You're 7,000 feet down when you see another fish that's glowing in the dark. The black dragonfish is a sly creature. It has its light-producing organs arranged along its belly. The spooky creature also has gleaming flashlights next to its eyes. They help the animal find prey and attract potential mates. At the same depth, you also spot an enormous pillbug. But unlike the critter you can find in your garden, this one is at least 20 inches long. That's the giant isopod, and it is, indeed, related to the roly-poly, as well as crabs and shrimps. These creatures may look somewhat scary, but they're harmless. They feast on other deep-sea animals only after those have passed away. At a depth of 13,000 feet, you notice the ocean floor has become a bit fluffy. That's because it's covered with zombie worms. These creatures rarely grow to be more than 2 inches long, and still, they can break down fairly large animals, so strong the acid they produce is. The worms' feathery appearance makes them look like plants, but the truth is, these creatures munch on rock-hard bones of the world's largest animals, such as whales. The grid-eye fish almost scares you out of your mind soon after that. This creature has a pair of large greenish oval plates on the top of its head and no eyes whatsoever. Experts believe that these bony membranes detect light coming from predators, saving the fish's life. You're now 3 miles down below the surface, and that's where you spot something bizarre on the bottom. It's definitely a fish, but it's standing on the ocean floor on 3 long, rigid legs. Ah, it's the tripod fish. Curious rather than scary. This creature has adapted to the almost complete darkness by giving up on its vision. It has to rely on vibration and touch to sense prey. And then, the fish uses its fins as hands to transport food directly into its mouth. You don't have time to go any deeper before you spot the faceless fish. This slightly off-putting creature has no eyes, and its mouth, smiling a Mona Lisa smile, is underneath its body. For the first time, the faceless cusk, which is the creature's official name, was seen more than a century ago. The next time it happened was only in 2017. Once you've reached a depth of 6 miles below the surface, you see deep-sea cucumbers. These bizarre creatures are much bigger than their shallow water relatives.
They spend most of their time on the sea floor. But if they need to escape predators, they are able to swim away. Deep-sea cucumbers have bright purplish coloring, tiny feet, and tentacles that surround their mouths. Cute. The question is, why do these deep-sea creatures look so scary? Life is very different there, at the bottom. Tremendous water pressure, a lack of food, and constant darkness. You have to adapt to survive in such extreme conditions.
Okay, this is how it starts. You're woken up by a strange sound. Not the alarm though, it's 5 a.m. After a few seconds, you realize the strange sound is a knock on the window. But you live on the 12th floor. Who or what could be knocking? Window cleaners? You live in an ordinary apartment building, not a skyscraper with offices. The knocking is getting stronger. You muster up the courage and go to the window, reach for the curtain, and abruptly pull it aside. What you see is fantastic. There are flying or floating small fish outside your window. Thousands of them. A shoal of sardines rising directly to the sky. A few knock on your window as they pass. There are so many sardines, you can't see what's going on outside. But as the last fish flies by, the full picture opens before you. Large and small fish fly between the houses. Octopuses cut through the air with their tentacles into a rain cloud. A huge whale is slowly drifting toward the horizon. Above the roof of a nearby house, 2 sharks chase 4 sea lions. A neighbor waves to you. He holds a fishing rod from the window and waits for the fish to bite. A flock of dolphins flies past your window. They cheerfully whistle as if they're greeting you. What's going on? You turn on the TV. All the channels are playing the same thing. Sea creatures of the earth have learned to fly, leaving the ocean and filling the air. All flights worldwide are canceled, and fishing vessels are idle in the seas, oceans, lakes, and rivers. And no one knows what happened. Well, you get dressed and go outside. Sea turtles crawl on the ground. They shiver, flap their fins, and rise into the air. A flock of shrimp flies past you. Has the ocean lost its gravity? What happened to all the water? You live in a port town close to the sea, so you decide to go to the coast. You reach the shore and see the water is calm. Gravity seems to be intact, but the sea creatures continue to take to the air. 6 months later, people gradually get used to the new natural phenomenon. Fish occupy most of the sky. Some sea creatures penetrate the middle layers of the atmosphere. Smaller birds have almost disappeared since the presence of predatory fish in the sky. But birds of prey that hunt fish gained weight. They've eaten so much that they can't fly anymore. Plump gulls, albatrosses, pelicans, and eagles can hardly walk and barely support themselves. Planes stopped flying and ship travel increased. The world's ecosystem is completely changing. The ocean becomes lifeless. The number of bacteria, microbes, and various nutrients in the water move to the air. People get sick more often, and in some areas, it becomes difficult to breathe. When it rains, millions of shrimp and small fish fall to the ground along with the water. Many predatory mammals that have been feeding on fish begin to starve. They go out to the roads and cities to find food. Scientists research the flying creatures and find that they somehow changed the structure of their lungs. But how fish got the ability to fly is still unknown. It seems nature just decided to push people out of their usual environment. Fishermen build balloons to fish in the sky. Some athletes throw a lasso at flying whales and ride them like huge horses. Though the landing can be difficult. Creatures that previously swam only in the very depths of the ocean settle at high altitudes. Researchers discover new, previously unknown fish species. From the ocean depths, a giant octopus rose into the air. Many call it the Kraken. This monster has found a new home right on top of Mount Everest. Now everyone is afraid to climb this mountain. The most deep-water creatures reach space. On the ISS, astronauts observe amazing animals flying past. They look like aliens from other planets, not Earth. In some areas, sharks descend to the ground for food. In these places, people are afraid to go out. Fishing companies buy huge Boeings and attach nets to it to catch fish in the air. But flights are not safe, especially when a whale suddenly appears smack dab in their path. Authorities impose curfews in many cities. People climb to the roofs and watch an incredible sight at night: flying jellyfish floating in the air. Thanks to the bioluminescent protein in jellyfish, they glow. Stars in the sky mix with the neon transparent creatures. But be careful, some of these jellyfish are very venomous. Some people were so fascinated by the beautiful jellyfishes that they touched them and ended up in the hospital. Squid, frightened by the new conditions, release ink into the air. When a lot of squids do this, the ink blots out the light from the sun. Massive traffic jams appear on the roads because electric eels fly through the streets and shock traffic lights. While all of humanity is looking up at the sky, almost no one has noticed what is happening down here. All over the world, people with a strange physical disability show up in hospitals. Weird holes form under people's ears. Doctors don't understand what they're dealing with. But then, one of the patients jumps into a lake, and it turns out he can breathe underwater. All people grow gills. At first, most people refuse to go underwater, but their changed lungs force them to do so or spend the rest of their lives in a gas mask. Some people are happy to go under the water and start a new life. The human body adapts to the cold temperatures and high pressure. There is a lot of work ahead to create cities and infrastructure, but things are not so bad. There is more space in the water than on land. 1 year later, humanity begins to fully migrate to the oceans. But instead of a new life, they find trash, a lot of garbage. Billions of tons of plastic are floating in the water. Their new home turns out to be a massive dump that people have created. Global plastic recycling starts in all waters. Every day, people take out tons of trash from the ocean. The water is getting cleaner. Trash dumps appear on land. 5 years later, water becomes cleaner. People don't live in garbage anymore. All the plastic is on land. As soon as the problem is solved, humanity begins to build underwater cities. But then all the fish start to fall into the seas and oceans. Everything returns to the usual way of life. People lose their gills, and now they're back on land. Sea creatures live in clean water once more. Philosophers and scientists from all over the world believe that in this way, nature has taught people a lesson. We understand how to live in a world of garbage and how we should care about our planet. People are making a considerable effort to preserve the planet's ecology. Waste recycling plants are built. Every person stops using plastic. Harmony begins between man and nature again. Hey, let's take a deep dive into ocean waters to see which of these creepy-looking animals are our friends. We're swimming in the tropical waters of Balava Island near Fiji. Can you see those giant creatures the size of a Volkswagen Beetle? Those are manta rays. They've got a long whip-like tail and large flat diamond bodies. There are two species of manta rays, the reef manta ray and the giant manta ray. They belong to the same family as sharks, but they only have small teeth in their lower jaw. They feed on zooplankton, tiny fish, and crustaceans. Manta rays are social animals, and they like people. Once you let them come close to you, they'll swim around you to observe you. Don't chase them though, because they're super fast swimmers. Their name translates to cloak or blanket, and out of all sea creatures, they've got the largest brain compared to body weight ratio. These fellas can recognize themselves in a mirror. The Asian sheep's head wrasse follows. Even if it seems unsightly, it's one of the friendliest fish you'll come across in the shallow waters of Japan, China, and Korea. It has protrusions on both its jaw and head. It likes to hide in its anemone, and it's usually scared to go out even at 40 inches long. One of these fellows developed a friendship with a Japanese scuba diver 30 years ago. When the diver found the fish, it was injured, and he helped it recover. The diver had been the caretaker of an underwater Shinto shrine. He calls the fish by hitting the underwater bell. Time to go swimming with the largest fish in the world, the whale shark. Though these creatures are sharks, they have a lot in common with whales. They can live for 100 years, though they've got tiny brains. They're indifferent to humans. These fellas don't care about anything they can't eat. And unlike other shark species, they won't bite you. Whale sharks are filter feeders. They do have teeth, 3,000 of them, but they don't use them. They've got a massive mouth, like me, but their throat is only the size of a quarter. Next, we have the sunfish, a fish without a tail that looks like it's been cut in half. It has large fins, and when you see it breaching on the surface, you'll think a shark is approaching. The sunfish dives deep in the water to let other fish exfoliate his skin and remove parasites. Once they're done, it returns to the surface to sunbathe. It's also a voracious eater. If it sees you in the waters, it'll likely approach you and observe you. Within a day, you'll be able to feed it from the palm of your hand. Time for the animal that looks like it's always smiling, the bottlenose dolphin. It's one of the most social sea creatures, and it travels in groups. It enjoys playing, hunting, raising calves, and helping out its community. Bottlenose dolphins are excellent swimmers with speeds reaching 19 miles per hour. They usually come up to the surface to breathe air through the blowhole on their head. These creatures are great communicators, and they send messages to each other. They use echolocation to navigate and find food. When they spot people, they become very friendly, so much that they let their guard down, and it makes them vulnerable to other sea creatures such as sharks. Heading to the Pacific coast, we'll come across some gray whales. Their skin is covered with parasites and other organisms that make their snouts look like rough pieces of rock. We gotta get on their nice side first. Gray whales can attack a large boat, a ship, or a vessel if they sense their calves are in danger. But generally, they're friendly and appear unbothered by rowing kayakers. In some cases, they'll approach small boats and allow humans to touch them, though you're required by law to keep your distance. If it wants to get closer, it will. If it feels threatened, it will act aggressively. Now, let me show you a fish with a tool on its head, the hammerhead shark. Their skull helps them with hunting. Their eyes are placed on the hammer's outer edges and gives them a 360-degree vertical view. But they've got a blind spot in front of their nose. Their heads are like metal detectors. Most of what they want is below the sand surface. So they lightly dip their heads in the sand and sweep up whatever is under there. You'll see them in temperate and tropical waters, both near the shorelines and offshore. They usually move in groups. They're mostly harmless to humans and divers, but there have been a few occasions where they got aggressive. But before they do, they'll give you a bunch of warning signs, and divers know how to handle them. Now, I'll show you something kind of smaller, the sea lion. These creatures are a bit tricky. They're playful, aggressive, arrogant, smart, and above all, curious. Sea lions can't breathe underwater, but they can dive almost 1,000 feet deep, and they can hold their breath for a long time. They take in air through their nose, and once they dip their heads in the waters, their nostrils slam shut. If they spot humans at the beach, they'll stay away and wait for them to leave. Wild sea lions aren't the friendliest to anyone, especially if they feel threatened. The approachable ones have been trained in captivity. Beluga whales are next. They're white with bulgy heads, and they're amongst the most social and loudest you'll ever meet. Their upwards-facing mouths make them look like they're smiling. When beluga whales are born, they're a dark gray shade. It takes 8 years for their skin to turn white. They can change the shape of their heads by blowing air around their sinuses. Beluga whales love humans. Once they make human friends, they don't want to leave. Even though they're wild animals, they become too entrusting with people. Marine biologists suggest staying away for their safety. Have you heard of sea cows? Those are actually called manatees. You'll see some in rivers and others in the ocean. Even though they're large, they usually stay in shallow coastal areas, munching on seagrass, leaves, and algae. Manatees bring their heads to the surface every 4 minutes or so to breathe, but they can hold their breath longer than that. They're slow travelers, and even if they aren't as smart as dolphins, they can understand colors. These fellas are gentle giants, and they like to approach humans searching for warmth. Next, we've got the basking shark, the second largest shark in the world. Their mouth is their most impressive feature, like me, since it can open more than 3 feet wide. Okay, you win. These creatures have an intimidating appearance, but despite their size, they're harmless to humans, and divers swim with them. They're very social and can form schools of 100 individuals. They swim near the water surface, filter feeding on plankton. They too have a bunch of teeth that they don't use. Do you know which creature can sing loud songs for 30 minutes? I know, berry manatee. That might be before your time. Actually, it's the humpback whale. Scientists aren't sure why they make those low howls and noises. They might be trying to communicate with others to attract mates. You'll see them near coastlines, feeding on tiny food, and they use their flukes to propel through the water. Humpback whales are less friendly than gray whales because they're very cautious. But they're the heroes of the ocean. They try to save other animals from orcas, and experts say they're capable of decision-making and problem-solving. On one occasion, a humpback whale jumped in to save a whale biologist from a tiger shark. Now, let's try to spot the expert in disguise, the Caribbean reef octopus. The specialized color cells help it blend in with the sand and ocean rock's rough texture. But Caribbean reef octopuses are loners, and they like to get around on their own. This creature is also teeny tiny. It can grow almost 5 inches, and with their legs getting as long as the average person's foot. If you get too close to them, they'll likely turn blue and warn you that they feel threatened. Even though they're trusting, it's better to keep your distance to keep them calm. A weird-looking creature walks around like a living vacuum cleaner down in the ocean's pitch-black depths. I'm talking about sea pigs. They got their name from their pinkish bodies, and they fit in the palm of your hand. These creatures don't swim, they walk around on the seafloor. Their legs consist of 5 to 7 pairs of enlarged tube feet, and they have tentacles around their mouths to fiddle through the mud to find scum to munch on. Yumbo! Since they're vulnerable, they have poisonous skin for protection against other sea creatures. If you encounter one, it'll be quite friendly, but if you want to keep it as a pet, you'll need a very deep tank. Speaking of slimy water creatures, let's talk about comb jellies. They're friendly animals that like to swim close to the shore on warm summer evenings. There are 2 types of comb jellies, some with 2 tentacles and some without any. You can spot them at night since they glow in the dark and light up the waters. One of them is the sea gooseberry. On the sand it looks like a transparent blob of jello, and it can fit into a teaspoon. Unlike jellyfish, comb jellies don't sting because they don't have stinging cells, and they're safe to swim with.
The stonefish. Stonefish aren't going to win any beauty contests, unless the pageant is for best rock look-alike. Their tiny unreflective eyes and rough skin blend in perfectly with their environment. A large head, an even bigger mouth, and a home full of, it's rocks. And just because you're on the beach doesn't mean you're safe. Stonefish can survive for 24 hours out of the water. Stepping on one or even handling one won't be that fun. Their dorsal fin spines have extremely strong venom. It shoots out when they get stepped on, and it can lead to paralysis or even heart failure. You'll need help fast. No wonder they're one of the most dangerous creatures in the water, or anywhere. Be careful when scrambling around rocky areas. They love to play hide and seek. The deep sea dragonfish. If there were a prize for the most hideous fish in the ocean, the deep sea dragonfish would win. With slimy, scaleless skin, massive teeth, and a face only a mother could love, This bad boy of the sea is nothing to mess with. It likes to swim between 700 feet and 6,000 feet below the surface of the ocean, where the waters are the darkest and coldest. Along with some other creatures on this list, the deep-sea dragonfish relies on its bioluminescent body parts to catch prey. It also uses its hanging appendage, which boasts a little red light on the end, coming out from its lower jaw. Many fish mistake this little light for prey, luring them right into the jaws of the deep-sea dragonfish. Very clever dragonfish. Very clever indeed. The fangtooth. The Mariana Trench is an underwater trench with a depth of 35,000 feet, nearly 7 miles below the ocean's surface. Let that sink in. While scientists know the Mariana Trench exists, it's one of the least explored places on Earth. It's also the deepest area of Earth's oceans. And although many creatures down there probably haven't even been seen by humans yet, scientists have had the creepy pleasure of getting to know the fangtooth. The fangtooth fish shamelessly lives up to its name. Just look at that thing. The fangtooth is carnivorous and feeds on just about anything it can find that gets caught in its sharp-toothed mouth. These fish rely on their contact chemoreception to find prey. In other words, they can sense chemical residue that comes off of other living organisms in the deep sea. This is because they don't have any light-producing cells on their bodies, unlike many other deep-sea fish. On top of all that, it's pretty dark down there, so whatever crosses their path, they chomp on. While these guys look pretty scary, they're not a threat to humans. They only grow about 7 inches long. Even so, I wouldn't want to run into one of these things during a relaxing swim in the ocean. The Dunkleosteus. Strangely enough, this prehistoric fish, known as the T-Rex of the seas, had no teeth. Those were replaced with bony plates that allowed it to have the strongest bite among other monsters of its size. The goblin shark. If you thought the movies about sharks were scary, this next deep-sea creature will make you swear off going for dips in the ocean forever. However, it lives 3,000 feet underwater, so you'll never likely see it face to face. The goblin shark looks like a cross between a shark and a creature from your worst nightmare. These sharks boast a protruding sword-like snout with a jaw that juts out to match. Unlike other sharks that have more of a gray hue, this creepy thing looks not so pretty and pink. Aside from their scary demeanor, what do scientists really know about the goblin shark? Well, not much, except that they can grow up to 18 feet in length. Looks like there's still a lot to learn about these guys, if you dare to. By the way, did you know that sharks don't sleep? Many species have to keep water moving over their gills to get oxygen, so they can't fall into a deep sleep like we do. That's why they stay half awake during rest. Typically, sharks don't even close their eyes. The cookie cutter shark. This shark is a living horror, with lower teeth being big and sharp, while the upper ones are much smaller. When its teeth fall off, the shark eats them to maintain calcium levels. Pretty smart solution for a shark. The frilled shark. Studying the frilled shark is like looking through a portal back to prehistoric times. That's because scientists think that these eel-like sharks haven't changed much since their oldest ancestors roamed the deep sea waters, so they're sometimes referred to as living fossils. These sharks' mouths are filled with a terrifying 25 rows of backward-facing sharp teeth, 300 in total. They're designed to grasp prey and hold them tight so they can't get away, according to early studies of the shark conducted in 1884 and published in the Bulletin of the Essex Institute. Luckily for swimmers, the frilled sharks live between 390 feet and 4,200 feet below the ocean's surface, so they'll probably never run into them. Probably. This is probably the worst nightmare of any dentist. The northern stargazer. Take a look at this cutie. The northern stargazer is definitely not something you'd wish to see on the ocean floor. This horrid creature hides its body under the sand, leaving its face above to wait for prey. The tasseled wobbegong. Here's another carpet shark on our list. It lies low on the bottom of the sea and patiently waits for its prey to come by. The Australian ghost shark. The Australian ghost shark isn't really even a shark, but a very bony fish. It's also a living fossil. It hasn't changed within the last 400 million years. Believe it or not, sharks and humans have a common ancestor that lived around 440 million years ago. Even though we both evolved in our own way, there are still some signs of that connection. For example, the genome of an elephant shark is very similar to humans. The Leopleurodon. This list of terrifying creatures would be incomplete without mentioning the terrifying and prehistoric Leopleurodon. This carnivorous marine reptile existed during the Colovian stage of the Middle Jurassic era and ruled the waters at 9 feet in length. Scientists believe Leopleurodon thrived in this deep-sea trench because of its ability to swim long distances and its 4 paddle-like limbs. While they probably weren't able to propel themselves toward prey like other animals of the area, they did manage to accelerate and attack very ruthlessly and efficiently. Additionally, they relied on their long snouts to smell prey, which leads scientists to believe they didn't rely on sight for hunting. This means they could have thrived in the dark Mariana Trench. Around 150 million years ago, Leopleurodon became extinct due to competition for prey against other thriving marine reptiles. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, thank goodness for that. Considering that scientists have only explored 5% of the ocean floor and found some of the scariest sea creatures imaginable, one can only dream of what other animals reside in the deep sea waters. Perhaps it's best to keep them in your imagination. Am I right? The megamouth shark. This shark is a filter feeder, and it's friendly to humans, although its huge mouth can look quite threatening. Like basking sharks, it swims with its mouth constantly wide open, as if it were on Twitter. The gulper eel. This deep-sea eel has an easily distended belly that allows it to swallow prey twice its size in a single monstrous bite. They have very unusual jaw shapes and can reach about 2 to 3 feet in length. Do you see that large log near the ocean floor? Maybe it's part of an old ship. Treasure, gold, diamonds, I'm rich! Well, as you get closer, you notice something. It's swimming! It's not a shark or a dolphin, it's a saltwater crocodile! Now don't panic. If you bump into one of these reptiles in the sea, it's unlikely it'll think of you as food. Crocodiles have a special valve in their throat that stops them from drowning underwater, but that doesn't mean they can't bite. Usually, they're heading to a nearby island, and the quickest way there is to body surf. They can't really take the ferry, you know. Watching one from a distance should be okay. Just don't swim to shore right away. They love to ambush their lunch in shallow water. If there's one time I'd want to see a great white shark, it's when I'm diving with crocodiles. They'll gladly take a crocodile-sized nibble, given the right motivation. Think you know what lurks in the depths of the ocean? While nearly 95% of our oceans haven't been explored yet, it's hard not to let your imagination run wild. But thanks to brave explorers, deep-sea cameras, and awesome archaeologists, we do know about some pretty incredible sea creatures living in our waters today, and millions of years ago. From the 9-foot spider crab to the 60-foot prehistoric megalodon, these sea dwellers come in all shapes and sizes. But let's focus on sea creatures famous for their huge size. Can you guess which living species of whale is the largest? Well, it's not the orca, but that's a good guess. The orca is a toothed whale that can grow to anywhere from 23 feet to 32 feet, which is slightly smaller than a school bus. How about the narwhal? Nope, they're not the biggest either. These unicorns of the sea live mainly in Arctic waters and only grow 13 feet to 20 feet in length, and that's including their 9-foot tusk. Tired of guessing? Okay, I give in. The largest whale that still exists today is the blue whale. At a jaw-dropping 82 feet to 105 feet, the blue whale is not only the biggest whale we know of, but is currently the largest animal to have ever lived on Earth. Seriously. These animals are bigger than a T-Rex, and even the prehistoric megalodon. If you were to put a blue whale next to a school bus, it would look like it could swallow it. Think about that. According to National Geographic, a blue whale's tongue can weigh the same as an elephant. And their hearts can weigh as much as a car. That doesn't even sound possible. It's no wonder these giants need to eat about 4 tons of krill every day. While there aren't too many animals living today that can compete with the blue whale's epic proportions, there is an entirely different species that is a good contender, and it's not quite what you would expect. It's a jellyfish. No, I'm not talking about the little jellyfish that wash up on the shore and ruin a perfectly good day at the beach. I'm referring to the lion's mane jellyfish, the biggest jellyfish around. This invertebrate can grow up to 120 feet long. They also come in different gorgeous colors like red, purple, or even shades of orange. As if their length wasn't impressive, the lion's mane jellyfish boast a whopping 8 sets of 70 to 150 tentacles. That means they can have up to 1,200 in total. And here's the giant oceanic manta ray, the largest type of ray in the world. Their wingspan can be longer than a bus. These guys can reach 30 feet in length. They also have the biggest brain compared to body size among all fish. Unlike their stingray cousins, mantas don't have venomous tails. And while the lion's mane jellyfish and the blue whale are yet to be beaten for the longest sea creature, there is one marine creature that can grow even larger in length. The Portuguese Physalia physalis, tentacles and all, can reach a length of 165 feet long, and that's according to mentalfloss.com. While this thing may look a lot like a jellyfish, it's actually known as a siphonophore, and there are hundreds and sometimes thousands of them that are genetically identical. Their long tentacles help the organism catch prey, and its sting is fatal to most animals, even humans in some cases. What's even creepier is that if one of the tentacles comes off the organism for whatever reason, it can float around the water for days before decomposing. Even if it's detached, this tentacle can still sting you. But don't go running out of the ocean just yet. Your chances of being hurt by a Portuguese Physalia physalis sting are pretty slim. However, if you do get stung, the side effects aren't pretty, with welts, stomach cramps, an elevated heart rate, and an upset stomach. While you don't want to go anywhere near these long creatures, they sure are pretty to look at. Check out all those colors. The Shastasaurus is the biggest marine reptile that has ever existed. These predators lived during the late Triassic period, about 210 million years ago. These amazing giants could reach lengths of up to 69 feet and weighed more than 75 tons. This made the Shastasaurus as heavy as a blue whale. And if you could stand this creature up vertically, it'd be as tall as a 7-story building. Despite appearances, the Shastasaurus was actually pretty slim for its size. Its ribcage was only 6 feet across. You'd think that this big guy was chowing down on other dinosaurs, but that's not the case at all. This reptile survived on a diet that consisted of small fish and cephalopods, like octopuses and squids. The Albertonectes is a bright representative of the plesiosaur family, meaning that this marine reptile had a small head on an incredibly long neck and large flipper-like limbs that helped it move through the water. These creatures occupied the seas around North America 76 to 70 million years ago. The length of this sea monster could reach 38 feet, with its neck taking up 23 feet of that length. Its neck was a true record breaker. It had a whopping 76 bones in it. No other animal known to humankind has had so many vertebrae in its neck. Scientists aren't sure why they needed such a lengthy neck. They might have used it to collect shellfish off the seabed, or perhaps it helped them capture their main prey, fish and squids. This aquatic reptile also had gastroliths in its stomachs. Some of them were as big as 5.5 inches in diameter. The Tylosaurus belonged to the mosasaur family. It dominated the shallow seas of North America about 85 to 80 million years ago. This was an enormous predator, with the biggest representatives reaching 45 feet in length. It had a narrow hydrodynamic body with a blunt, powerful head that the animal used to ram and stun its prey. Its body was equipped with agile flippers and a long tail decorated with a maneuverable fin. The Tylosaurus was a carnivore, and its diet included not only fish, turtles, and small sharks, but also other mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and flightless birds. Meet Ophthalmosaurus. This prehistoric reptile thrived during the late Jurassic period and lived in oceans all over the world. Ophthalmosaurus weighed somewhere around 6,000 pounds and grew to approximately 16 feet long, according to newdinosaurs.com. That's about the same length as the beluga whale that exists today. It's too bad these guys went extinct before we had a chance to see them ourselves, as their cartoonish wide eyes and dolphin-like features are pretty darn cute. Of course, the Ophthalmosaurus evolved over time to become ophthalmologists, or eye doctors that we know today. No, that's just a lie. Just testing you. The Mosasaurus is a truly gigantic predator that dominated the seas all over the world about 66 million years ago. According to fossil evidence, some specimens could be more than 50 feet in length. This fact makes the Mosasaurus the biggest marine carnivore of its time. One of the most terrifying things about this creature was its crocodile-like head, decorated with literally hundreds of razor-sharp teeth, neatly organized in 2 rows on both jaws. The thing is that it was pretty challenging for the Mosasaurus to grab its prey in the water. That's why it had all these teeth, plus something special: pterygoid teeth anchored to the bones on the roof of its mouth. This made hunting and holding onto its prey much easier. The Styxosaurus belonged to the plesiosaur family and lived during the late Cretaceous period, around 85 to 70 million years ago. Upon first glance at this dinosaur, you might mistake it for a sea snake, and it'd be an honest mistake. Styxosauruses were about 35 feet in length, but over 16 feet of that consisted just of their long snake-like neck. They had a comparatively small body and weighed approximately 4 tons. Their mouths were full of razor-sharp cone-shaped teeth that they used to catch fish. They didn't need to chew their prey, thanks to the 200 small stones called gastroliths in their bellies that probably aided in digestion. At the same time, some scientists believe that the Styxosaurus used these stones to sink to the ocean bottom in search of particular types of fish. Looks kinda like Nessie to me.